guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today I have my November wrap up, otherwise known as the month of mediocrity. So in the month of November, I was doing things a little bit differently with my TBR. I was mood reading a little bit, taking things a little bit easier and not forcing myself to read, just reading at a natural pace, and I got read whatever I got read. I really enjoyed doing this and I still did get a considerable amount of books read. I read 8 books in total and also DNF'd another one at page 300. So my stats, when they come, represent all the books that I finished, so do bear in mind that I read another 300 pages of a book that I DNF'd this month as well. But it's also reflected in my stats that this is my second worst month of the year, which is fine. At this point in the year, I'm not really focusing on the quantity of what I'm reading. I'm just kind of doing whatever I feel like. But getting into those stats, in the month of November, I read a total of 3,045 pages, which broke down to an average of 102 pages per day, which, as I said last month, I'm perfectly happy with. My kind of minimum that I aim for is 100 pages per day, so I just got in there this month. For the star ratings, this is where you get to see why I called it the month of mediocrity. We had 2 2-star reads, 2 3-star reads, and 4 4-star reads. So that is 4 of the books that I've read, half of the books that I read this month, below a 4-star rating, and that makes my monthly average 3.25 stars per book, which is quite low for me. I'm normally around a 3.6. For the demographics, I read 2 children's books, 3 young adult and 3 adult. For the formats, were pretty straightforward this month. Every book that I read was a standardly formatted novel. For the genres of the books that I read, we had 4 fantasy, 1 contemporary, 1 horror, 1 mystery and 1 science fiction. And finally, for the places where I sourced these books from, 6 of them were from my own TBR that existed prior to the start of 2021, and 2 of the books I read are books that I hauled in 2021. So we'll start off by talking about that DNF, which is probably the most hyped book that I read this month, but that was Legend Born by Tracy Deonn. So this one is a young adult fantasy that is following a girl called Bree whose mother has died. Now we start off right at the beginning of this book where she's being told by the police and the doctors that her mother has passed away and it was a hit and run. Before her mother's death, Bree had actually just applied and been accepted to this like advanced college program, and after her mother's death she does continue on to do this. However, one day at a party she sees a monster and a group of scary to her magic wielders are fighting off this monster, and her memories are erased afterwards, but she very quickly realizes that she can still access those memories, and she also notices something a little bit strange about her recollection of the night she was told her mother was dead. So she essentially joins the secret society of people called Legend Born to uncover what happened to her mother, like what involvement they had in her mother's death. This is also an Arthurian legend, so it deals a lot with King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table and their descendants, and that is essentially what the Secret Society of Legend Born is based on. So the reason I DNF'd this book at the page 300 mark is that it has a whole ton of elements in here. So we have the Arthurian legend, we have the mystery of what happened to Bree's mother, we also have like an entirely other magic system that contradicts the magic system that we learn that surrounds the Arthurian legend, and we also have a lot about racism in here. There's a lot of themes of racism, racial prejudice, white privilege, colonialism and slavery in here as well. I very much see what Tracy Deonn was trying to do with this book, and the concept of what she tried to do with Legend Born I'm actually really excited by, because essentially you have this centuries old King Arthur legend paired with all of the ancestry and knowledge and law that Bree has lost due to colonialism and slavery, and the two are meant to counterbalance each other and also accentuate the injustice that was done to Bree's ancestors and how that is leaking forward into the present day. And even though slavery has ended, prejudice has not, and prejudice still continues. And I really liked that idea, but in reality there was just a lot going on in this book and it was hard for me to process. So all of the Arthurian legend stuff is actually really complex and the information is dumped on you across like 2 chapters, and then 50 pages later you have this whole other magic system that is also dumped on you in a similar style. style before you've even had a chance to process the Arthurian legend. And then the bulk of this plot is actually following a series of trials that Bree is trying to complete to get into this secret society, which, to be honest, of all the things in here, I found that to be the least interesting, and it is what forms like the structure of the narrative. So sadly this was a miss with me. I didn't enjoy it. I found that even though we had all these elements, the pacing was also fast, but it was just not holding my attention at all, and I was just reading a chapter and then immediately forgetting everything I've just read. So I decided to give it up on this one, but this has a very high rating on Goodreads. It has an average rating of 4.44 stars, and going off my Goodreads friends rating of this, it seems to be a Marmite book. There's a couple of 3-star reviews in there, but the rest of them are either 5 stars or 2 stars, and there is no in between. So the first book that I actually completed in the month of November was The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. This one is a classic horror story about this doctor who is investigating paranormal activity. So he rents this house called Hill House for a period of, I think it's 3 months, and he invites a group of people to go there with him. So 2 of them have histories of experiencing paranormal activity, even though they haven't taken a particular interest in it, and one of them is the family member of the people who actually own the house, and they stay there for a period of, I think it's a couple of weeks the story is told over, and their purpose is to record any of the mysterious happenings in the house for the book that the doctor is writing. So sadly I did not enjoy this one. This was one of my 2-star reads for the month. However, I think that a lot of it is to do with my personal taste and things that I really don't like reading about. So the horror elements in here are very unsettling, but they are also very ambiguous, and this kind of mirrors the conclusion of the plot of this story, and it kind of makes sense why everything surrounds this ambiguity. However, ambiguity is not something that I enjoy in books. Actually, it's one of the things that I most dislike, and with the writing style playing into this theme, we had lots of run-on sentences and kind of meandering plot lines in here to fully accentuate the vibe that Shirley Jackson was going for. But because I just don't like ambiguity, like, it really just didn't do anything for me. If that is something that you enjoy in books, like not really knowing what's happening, then I think that there is a chance that you could enjoy this, because everything about this book is crafted to create that ambiguous, like, unsettling atmosphere, but just absolutely not for me. And then I hated the dialogue in here. A lot of the conversations that these characters have are just so inane and pointless, and the horror elements only really start creeping in around halfway through the book as well. So like the first half of this, considering it's only like a 200-page book, hated all of that dialogue, but this is definitely, like, it has a lot of things about it that I just generally do not enjoy. The second book that I read was Grey Sister by Mark Lawrence. This one is the second book in the Book of the Ancestor series, and it is an adult grimdark fantasy following a girl called Nona Grey who is about to be executed when she is saved from the block by the abbess of the Convent of Sweet Mercy. So the abbess takes her to the convent, and there she finds out that this is actually a convent of assassin nuns, and Nona begins her training to become an assassin. So I've given both of the books in this series 4 stars. I love myself an assassin story, and something that I really loved about the first book in this series is that it really dove into the actual lessons and the different branches and paths that these nuns could take in their time training to be assassins. And I also liked in the first book that it had these glimpses of the future in between the sections of the book that showed the characters in a very different place to where they are in the bulk of the narrative. Now this book is told in all one part, so we don't have those glimpses of the future that I loved so much, but we do still have this really dark, kind of depressing atmosphere that I really liked about book 1. And we also have a great cast of characters. I love myself a morally grey character, and Nona is definitely one of those, and she is also very conflicted. Now I also love myself a grimdark fantasy because I prefer my fantasies to be a little bit on the darker side and not to shy away from all of those like hard, gruesome, gory things. So this series also definitely delivers on that front. This series is often compared to Nevernight by J. Kristoff, which I definitely agree, and Nevernight did come before Red Sister, but something like, there were a couple of elements in this book that brought it even closer to Nevernight, which I definitely think is a choice. Like, the similarities between these two series are actually quite spooky if it was done like unintentionally, if Mark Lawrence had never read Nevernight when he was writing this series, because the element that was introduced in here was just another thing that is also present in Nevernight. But aside from the similarities between the characters and also those certain elements in here that are like Nevernight, we also have a very similar tone. So essentially there's not a lot this book could do or this series could do that would make me dislike it, but it is missing a couple of things that I really love and like make a book 5 stars for me. One of those being those moments of everything coming together, which I do believe comes in the 3rd book, Holy Sister, but I'm not getting any of these points where like things are revealed where I'm having like a eureka moment where everything suddenly makes sense to me, and that is something I really enjoy, like being able to track plot points back throughout the course of the book or the series. So that isn't quite happening yet, but I do believe it is coming. So maybe Holy Sister will be a 5-star read for me, but I have also heard that is commonly the most disliked book in the series, so we'll see when I get to it. Another 4-star read of the month was Dragon Keeper by Robin Hobb. This is the 1st book in the Rainwild Chronicles. However, it is the 10th book in the realm of the Eldlings overall. So Robin Hobb is an adult fantasy author that has this universe called the realm of the Eldlings, and the majority of the books that she's written take place in this universe. They can technically be read separately, but you do get like a much more thorough overarching plot, some really cool Easter eggs, and plot lines interlocking and running adjacent to each other if you do read the entire thing in order. So I can't really actually tell you too much about the Rainwild Chronicles because the happenings in this book and even the setup for the plot are directly impacted by and wouldn't even happen without what happens right at the end of the Life Ship Traders. But as you can tell from the title, this is about dragons, and essentially we have a group of dragons that a community of humans said they would look after. However, there are a lot of problems being encountered with these dragons. The dragons are getting fed up of being kept in this area. The humans are getting tired of looking after them. So they assemble a group of young people who essentially don't have a lot going for them. They won't be missed, like they don't have a whole ton of family or they don't have many prospects, and those people become the dragon keepers and they are tasked with moving the dragons somewhere else. Something that became clear very quickly to me when I started this book is that I definitely prefer the Bingtown and Rainwild side of the world as opposed to the Six Duchies side of the world within Robin Hobb's realm of the Eldlings, because with the Six Duchies and the Fitz books we are locked in Fitz's perspective, and he is obviously, as we all are as humans, very singularly focused on the things going on around him. So some of the things that are more interesting to me that pertain to the magic of the world, Fitz just does not care about because it doesn't affect his life and it's nothing to do with his current purpose and what's going on with him. Whereas in the Life Ship Traders and the Rainwild Chronicles we are getting a multi-perspective story that pretty much focuses, like the main focus of these series are the more magical elements of the world, but also the origins of the magic of the world, which as a reader, something I'm always interested in when I'm reading fantasy. As usual, Robin Hobb has the power to write the most relatable, hateable characters that I have ever read. So some of them are just terrible people, but some of them are the people that you really dislike that aren't inherently evil. So like colleagues at work that you despise with every fiber of your being, but are they gonna hatch an evil plot to destroy the world? Probably not. They're just a bit of a dick. Robin Hobb writes those characters so well in a way that makes you despise them. Something else that I really love about Robin Hobb is that the societies that she creates are very believable in that she really thinks about what this group of people in this area of the world are going to believe, how they're going to behave, what is necessary for their day-to-day life, instead of just kind of, you know, changing up the setting a little bit. Like she really goes into the like socio-political issues of these societies, and this series, I feel like this book definitely, but I feel like this series as a whole is going to focus a lot on disability and the attitudes on disability of the people, especially in the Rainwilds, but possibly other locations if we move to other areas of the world throughout the course of this series. Massive trigger warnings for ableism in here on a lot of different levels, and some of it is very difficult to read. But something else that I really enjoy is because she's good at writing these bad characters and characters that you don't like and have morals that you don't agree with, she provides lots of different levels of opinion and discussion on the issues that she tackles in her books, and that also really came through in here as well. Now the only reason that this isn't 5 stars to me is that this is not a complete book. So I believe that there were some issues with the publisher. I'm not sure whether this series was intended to be a duology or a trilogy, but essentially it wasn't supposed to be 4 books, and because of that this this is pretty much what Robin Hobb intended to be half of one book, and it definitely reads like that because we have a lot of slow build up in here, as is typical for the first book in a fantasy series, you know, like world building, getting to know characters, setting up the plot, but it builds up to nothing. Like, it's a very underwhelming conclusion to a book, and that is pretty much the only reason this got 4 stars from me, because the second book is intended to be the second half of this one book. I think that that has potential to be 5 stars. I'm actually really sad about it because I think that the Rainwild series may be overall, like, if it carries on in this tone, and because I like the Bingtown Rainwild side of the world more, potential for this to be one of my favorite series in the realm of the Eldlings. But I'm a little bit concerned going forward that the publishing issues are going to affect the series in the way they've affected this book, meaning that no individual book will get 5 stars from me. I then did an installment in my Unhaul project, which is where I read books that I'm kind of unsure about or I've lost interest in them over time. And the first book I picked up for that was also my first book for Believathon, because that was Ivy Aberdeen's Letter to the World by Ashley Herring Blake. This one is a children's contemporary story that follows a young girl called Ivy whose entire life has been destroyed by a hurricane or tornado that sweeps through her town and completely obliterates her house. Like, it's just a pile of things. It's not even a structure anymore. So Ivy and her family are sent to the school gym for the night, as that is the evacuation point, and while they are spending the night there, Ivy's sketch pad is stolen, and it contains a lot of drawings of her holding hands with other girls because she has been starting to question her sexuality a little bit. I gave this one 4 stars. I really enjoyed it, and I think that it was so well done. This was also way more complex than I expected. We have quite a few things going on in the plot of here, because not only do we have Ivy kind of coming to terms with the fact that her home is entirely gone, we also have her questioning her sexuality. There's also somebody posting the drawings from her sketch pad back to her with notes that say things like, I really like your drawing, I think you should talk to somebody about it, like trying to get her to come out essentially. And then we also have Ivy feeling very displaced in her family because she has 2 baby twin brothers, and before that she was the youngest child in the family. So she feels very pushed out of her family now that her parents are dealing with these 2 babies and not able to give her the attention and support that she needs right now. So something that I really enjoyed about this when I was reading it is that because we are reading from Ivy's perspective, we are obviously like really feeling for her. She's really going through it here, but at the same time, some of the things going on, like, you can see them from another perspective. Perfect example is the things going on with her parents. Like, I'm seeing why she's feeling pushed out. I'm seeing what her parents are doing and how that is impacting their daughter, but I'm also seeing 2 adults whose house has been completely destroyed. They have nowhere to live. They have 2 babies to deal with in this time, and then just generally they have 2 babies. They have to look after their family, but they also have to go to work to make money to pay for the house that they've got that has just been destroyed. So I love that we had all of these different plot threads in here, and I love that they very realistically built Ivy to this place where she was just feeling so desolate and so alone and like she had no one to talk to. I also obviously think this is a very important book, especially in terms of it being aimed at a younger audience, as it really contributes to helping to normalize relationships in like books, the media, and real life that aren't heteronormative, which is obviously very helpful to children who are maybe like starting to approach puberty and maybe starting to have confusing feelings. Like, if we could normalize things like this, then the feelings that these children are experiencing are obviously not going to be as confusing and less likely to impact like their mental health in later life. So overall, very solid read, very important book. Would recommend that you pick this up if it sounds at all interesting to you. The only reason it wasn't 5 stars to me is because it's a contemporary and a children's book, so my enjoyment was obviously impacted by that. But in terms of this being a solid like book, in my opinion, it did everything that it set out to do very well. The second book that I read for my Unhaul project was the second 2-star book that I read, and that was Nerve by Gian Ryan. So this one is a young adult like tech sci-fi that follows this game of online dares, and our main character is like the mousy, quiet, responsible friend in her friendship group, while her best friend is like the loud, outgoing one that gets all of the attention. So the main character essentially wants to be a little bit more like her friend, especially as she really likes this guy who she thinks is more interested in her best friend than her. So she decides that she's going to join this online game as a player, and the whole thing about this game is that the dares get more and more high stakes while the prizes get more and more desirable. So every time you think of pulling out, you get a more desirable offer. I didn't expect to love this going into it, which is why it was on my unhaul cart, but I at least expected it to be fast-paced and exciting, you know, like a thriller. Just give me a little bit of something that's keeping me turning the pages on the edge of my seat, like wanting to know what comes next. Now, I did keep turning the pages in this because I wanted to see what came next, but not because it was high stakes and exciting, just because the majority of the dares in here were so sleazy, considering the main character is a 17-year-old girl, that I was turning the pages thinking, what the actual fuck am I reading in this book? Because I don't want to go into spoiler territory, I will just talk about the very first dare in here. But the main character has to go into a coffee shop, pour a cup of cold water over her head, and while she does it, she has to say like, cold water makes me hot. So that's not even remotely high stakes to me. It's a little bit embarrassing, but like, sure, yeah, you can do that. So she pours this cup of water over her head. She has to take a friend to record her to be uploaded to this online system to participate in the dares, and she's wearing a white top and a silk bra, and the water goes through her shirt and makes it completely see-through. This video is then uploaded to the internet where thousands of people of undisclosed ages can see a 17-year-old girl in a see-through top, and it only gets more sleazy from there. So instead of these dares becoming like more high stakes and life-threatening, even though they are all of them somewhat dangerous in nature, they just become more and more sexual in a way that made me really uncomfortable when the main character is a 17-year-old girl. Aside from that, the characters were pretty two-dimensional. Writing, okay, I guess. But essentially the only thing I wanted this to do was thrill me, and it didn't even follow through with like the high-risk nature of the dares. And I don't think the prizes were that good either. I mean, maybe they were. Maybe it's just because at this point in my life, the things that they were offering her are not something that I would be doing things like this for. The one basic thing that I wanted from this, it did not deliver on. And the final book that I read for that unhaul project was The Cousins by Karen McManus. So this one was on my unhaul cart because it is a young adult mystery. I don't really read mystery, and when I do, I tend to stray towards mystery thrillers because I really like things with like shocking plot twists. I like darker stories, and I just don't feel like young adult can deliver what I look for when I'm going into a mystery thriller. And then this wasn't even a thriller to start off with, but I was pleasantly surprised by this and I gave it 3 stars. I did actually enjoy it. So this is going to get confusing while I explain it because of all of the family terminology. Our 3 main characters in here whose perspectives we cycle through are all cousins. They don't really know each other very well because their family has fractured over time, but their parents were disinherited by their mother 20 years prior to the start of this novel, so before the kids were born, for unknown reasons. They received a letter from their mother that said, you know what they did, but according to all of the children, they actually don't have any idea what it was that they did. So one summer, the cousins receive a letter from their estranged grandmother that invites them to come and work at her island resort because she has had a change of heart and she would like to get to know them a little bit better. So they all meet up on the ferry and head over to this island with the goal in mind to find out like why the grandmother has not only disinherited her children but allowed that to have a knock-on effect where she doesn't even care about her grandchildren, and they accidentally unravel a whole ton more than they anticipated in the process. So this was definitely compelling. I was going through this like wanting to get to the bottom of this mystery. It was also pretty enjoyable. It delivered elements to the plot that I wasn't expecting. I did guess one of the main plot twists, but I think that might have been intentional because there were extra plot twists that hadn't even entered my brain by the time we got to the end of this. I didn't love the delivery of some of the plot twists because I felt like they were kind of over-explained in like the page leading up to the reveal, which for me lessened the impact. Overall, like it wasn't anything groundbreaking for me, but definitely an enjoyable and compelling thriller. So if that's something you want as a little bit of light entertainment, would recommend maybe picking this one up. Moving away from the Unheard Project, the next book that I picked up was Sorcerers Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. This one is a YA fantasy following a young woman called Elizabeth who is an apprentice at a great library, and these libraries are tasked with protecting the people of the world from the powerful and dangerous grimoires that reside in the library. So one day Elizabeth randomly wakes up in the middle of the night and the library is mysteriously silent. So she does a little bit of exploring and she finds that the director who pretty much adopted her has been murdered and one of the grimoires is released. She then finds out that the rest of the inhabitants of the library had been placed under a sleeping spell that somehow didn't work on her, and when the authorities of the library find her, they blame her for the death of the director and send her to stand trial, escorted by the very handsome and eccentric sorcerer Nathaniel Thorn. Now, because Elizabeth has been raised in this library, her life has been rather sheltered and she believes that all sorcerers are evil with absolutely no nuance, but ultimately this is a fantasy romance story, so I think we can see where we're going with this. So this one sadly was a little bit of a disappointment for me. I was really highly anticipating picking this one up because I really enjoyed An Enchantment of Ravens. My one main criticism of An Enchantment of Ravens was that it was so short and it could do with like a little bit more plot to balance out the romance and deliver like a well-rounded story. So when this is like twice the size of An Enchantment of Ravens, I pretty much expected it to deliver the elements that I was missing. Now this definitely delivered more plot, however I feel like it delivered a little bit too much plot to the point where it didn't deliver on the same level the things that I really enjoyed about An Enchantment of Ravens. So the first thing that put me off this book is that the first 150 pages is super fast paced. We have 3 huge action scenes in that first 150 pages and everything's just a little bit too fast for me to get to grips with this fantasy world, and I really like to know the details of things. So because I only had a brief moment at the beginning to figure out what was going on, I still do not really understand the concept of the grimoires. Like there's monsters associated with the grimoires, but I still do not know for sure whether the grimoires turn into monsters or whether they release monsters. Like I don't know. I've read this entire thing and I'm still not sure. One thing I will say that I did really enjoy about this is the character of Nathaniel Thorn, because him specifically, but also more elements of this book, are essentially a love letter to Howl's Moving Castle, with Nathaniel Thorn pretty much being the Wizard Howl, who is one of my favorite fictional characters of all time. Like I love myself an eccentric sorcerer, and combined with Nathaniel's sarcasm, like I've already said, Elizabeth assumes that he's evil. So when she first meets him, she asks him like what he's doing and he says that he's off to drink the blood of virgins and things like that. Like he fully flatly delivers these statements and Elizabeth completely believes him because she assumes that all sorcerers are evil. So I really enjoyed the characters and the romance of this story because I feel like that's where Margaret Rogerson's writing really shines, as with An Enchantment of Ravens. But I just found that I didn't care about the plot, especially because it was so fast paced, which isn't my preference, that I really struggled through the last 50 pages of this, just bringing the book to its conclusion. So really love the characters. Plot, not so much, and it got 3 stars from me overall. And then the final book that I read in the month of November was my final 4 star, so we did end the month on a higher note, but I will say I was really hoping that this was going to be a 5-star read and it just missed the mark, and that was Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. So this is the second and final book that I read for Believathon, as this one is a children's fantasy story following a young girl called Amari whose brother has gone missing. This book opens up where Amari is being disciplined because she's pushed a girl at school, and the parents on the the parents board, like the school board, that's what I'm looking for. The parents on the school board are pushing for her expulsion because they don't believe that she deserves to be there or should be there anyway. So Amari goes home disheartened and continues to look for her brother. She's been posting his face online to try and see if anybody's seen him, and before she knows it, she has a mysterious delivery guy at her door telling her her that he's just delivered a box to her brother's wardrobe, and in that box Amari finds an invitation to the Bureau of Supernatural Affairs, which she thinks is where her brother worked. Now, all her brother ever said about his job is that it was top secret and very dangerous, so Amari enrolls on this summer program at the Bureau of Supernatural Affairs to follow in her brother's footsteps and ultimately find out what happened to him. So I was gifted this book by Gavin, so thank you very much to Gavin for that. But I was also recommended this by Gavin specifically because of my love for the Nevermore series by Jessica Townsend, and I can confirm that this definitely delivers on the Nevermore vibes, and I loved it for that reason. This beautiful whimsical story with this, I say magic school, it's not necessarily a magic school, there are magical elements to the school, but the particular branch that Amari is dealing with and wanting to go into is more like secret agent style, which is probably the reason why this book got 4 stars and not 5, because I do prefer myself a magical story as opposed to like a totally spies kind of story. But the whimsy in this was just so wonderful. Like, it really perked me up, because after DNF'd Legendborn, which is what I was reading directly before this, I was just looking for something to keep me out of a slump, and this definitely did that. I have pre-ordered the sequel to this. I'm really excited to continue. It delivered some plot twists at the end that I definitely did not see coming, and because of that I'm really interested to see what direction the second book goes in. And something else that I really enjoyed about this is that it has a lot of fictional and historical people woven into the narrative. So we have characters in here that are real people in the history of this world, like Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Moreau, and Van Helsing, and I really loved how B.B. Alston wove them into the history of this book. And I also feel like it's one of those added things which makes middle grade such fun to read as an adult, because not all children are going to know like who Van Helsing is, you know, so it feels like an Easter egg for adults, which is something that I really enjoy, because what I do love about middle grade is that when you read it as an adult you get a whole different perspective than you would get when you read it as a kid. So I like it when you can pick out those elements that you feel like an author has added for the adult audience that are reading this just for fun or to their children. So there you have it. Those are the 8 books that I read and the 1 book that I DNF'd in the month of mediocrity, also known as November. Okay reading month. I'm hoping in December, like, I don't even care if I don't read as much as I've read this month, and I probably won't because it's December and of course I'm busy with work, and then after that we have like Christmas prep and all of that stuff, and just enjoying time with friends and family over the festive period, which is something that I definitely don't do enough of throughout the rest of the year. But what I do want is some higher quality books. So please, because some of these, like some of them I knew I wasn't going to enjoy, or like I didn't think I was going to enjoy, but some of these I went in expecting like 4 or 5 star reads and was disappointed. So all I want from December, please, is some books that I enjoy a little bit more. But down in my comments, please let me know what you guys read in November. What was your favorite book of November? Please do let me know, and also let me know what you thought about any of the books that I read in the month of November. But that's it for this video, guys. So please don't forget to like if you liked it and subscribe if you wanna. If you head into my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish Candle website, the Instagram for that, and a 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye.
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you'll go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.